Hey everybody, we're back. It's Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and just like every week, we're going to be going all in today on something related to shadow work. Now, over the past few months that I've been doing these, people will just randomly pop questions in about shadow work, what it is, why we need it, all that kind of stuff. And one that's come up more than one time has been the question of what is actually in the shadow? Like, what is the shadow? What needs to come out of there? Why is it that I keep hearing shadow work? And so I wanted to do a whole session today about what lies within the shadow. This is going to be a super powerful one. I imagine it's going to go very deep. So if you have any questions as we go along, definitely put them in the chat. Let's get the questions going and flowing, and we'll see what we can do about answering each and every single one of them. For those of you guys who are new, I'm Danielle Massi, licensed psychotherapist and intuitive shadow worker. And every single week we dive into some form of shadow. I found when I started doing my own work years ago that, there's so much love and light that you hear about in the spirituality community. It's like love and light and everything is good and rainbows and fairies. And yeah, that stuff is awesome and it's wonderful, but it's not everything. There's more to life than just the beautiful and the shiny stuff, though that is where we're all trying to get to. That's where we want to be. But to get there and to live in that space, we have to be willing to work through the other parts of our humanity. And there's so much more to us than that. Humans have a whole range of emotions, and they're not always ones that are super happy and pretty. And we have them for a reason. We have these other emotions so that they can help us process things that we experience and figure out what to do with them. And just like we have those emotions, we also have this other side of us. We have the parts of us that are a little bit darker. We have the parts of us that are a little bit more hidden and uncovered. And that is what shadow work is. So today we're going to talk about 5 of the biggest things that you're going to see when you start doing your own shadow work, when you start diving into that shadow space. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Let's talk about all the things. And to start with one that is pretty common for every single person that you come across, and that is early childhood trauma. All early childhood trauma is anything that felt heightened in a negative way when you were a child. This can be as simple as something like getting bullied in school, which I would imagine a lot of you guys watching this video right now have been in a situation where there was bullying involved. It's so common for kids. But when it happens persistently or it happens, what tends to happen is the brain doesn't really know what to do with that information. It doesn't know how to process it. And so it buries it down into that unconscious mind. Early childhood trauma could be stuff like hearing your parents fighting and they don't know that you're listening, so they're saying horrible things, or just feeling the voices accelerate and the tone get a little bit nasty. What happens for kids is they internalize that stuff and they imagine it's about them and they bury it into the unconscious mind. Early childhood trauma could be an injury. It could be falling down and breaking your ankle or having a TV stand fall on you. Early childhood trauma is extremely common. I would imagine now that those of you guys watching this can think of at least a few times that you experienced something that was relatively traumatic as a child. Just for a minute. Think about the things that have happened to you. Think about the things that happened to you before the age of 7 or 8. For those of you guys who don't have a lot of memories before that point, it might be that there was a lot of trauma before that point. And so what the brain will do is it'll just black out some of those memories. Like you're having a bad night of drinking and we need to just black you out so you don't remember what's happening. You'll literally black out memories from your own childhood to protect yourself, to save yourself. Some of you don't do that. Some of you just don't remember it whatsoever, and you don't realize you don't remember it because you have so many positive, vivid memories that you don't realize the pieces that are missing. You don't recognize the traumas that have happened to you, the things that were terrifying for you as a little kid. It could be one that happened to me is I walked in on my parents watching a scary movie, and I saw some really graphic images on the screen. It was horrifying, and I forgot about it for a long time. And then I did my shadow work and I remembered it. And I had a fear of certain things because of that, but no memory of it, or at least not that I knew of. It was unconscious memory. And so I had to go in and pull that stuff out in order to heal it and to do the work around that stuff. So those early childhood traumas, they really get stuck within the unconscious mind. And those are the first things you'll see typically when you start doing your shadow work, when you start pulling that stuff out from the unconscious. The next thing that tends to fall into the space is heartbreak. And so just like we talked about other emotions being really prominent, like you have every single one of your primary emotions from the time that you're born. Joy, sadness, excitement, anger, fear. Those are primary. And then you have secondary emotions like shame, guilt. Those take a little bit more complex thought to create. And when you have complex emotions, they usually tap into multiple parts of you. You see them, you feel them, you sense them, you think about them. And so they're really deeply encoded into your memory. But when you have one that is so extreme that the brain deems it harmful, it will put it into that unconscious box. It'll store it away within the unconscious so that it can't hurt you. And heartbreak can very often fall into that place. When we get our hearts broken, it tends to be a multifaceted system where we experience extreme emotions. Everything we believe to be true is no longer true. And so we have neural pathways that need to be rewired because the current way reality is working is not the way it's going to continue to exist. And so things need to shift, and that can be shocking for the body. Physically, there's a change, especially if you're someone who enjoys physical touch, that you're not going to have this other person around you anymore. Or if you're someone who really enjoys words of affirmation, you're not going to have this person to talk to you, to be there with you. And when we have something happen that's inherently negative on so many different levels, the brain can sometimes be put into overdrive where it doesn't know what to do to help you. And when that happens, that can fall into the unconscious. That can fall into your shadow. And so when we do shadow work, we can sometimes pull that stuff out. A lot of people doing shadow work will talk about twin flames because twin flame relationships tend to be really fiery and passionate, and they burn hot and they burn bright and then they burn out. And so twin flames come up a lot during the course of shadow work. Because if you've had a twin flame relationship, you know yourself that it is something that can be, while beautiful, extremely intense. And the intensity is what buries it into that shadow space. And speaking of intensity, number 3 on my list of things that you'll see within your shadow is traumas around sexual interactions, sexual trauma. So this could be something around doing things alone or with a partner. So it could be like masturbating and you have somebody walk in on you, or having photos that you were sexting to other people put on the internet or passed around your school. It could be having someone say something incredibly inappropriate to you, like just making you feel dehumanized. It could be someone touching you inappropriately. It could be rape. It could be any kind of sexual abuse. And all of those things would then fall into the shadow. Because the brain, just like everything else that we've discussed before, when the brain doesn't know what to do with something, it represses it. Most of you guys watching right now live are women. And as women, we tend to carry a lot of trauma in the sacral chakra, which is the one that is directly associated with our womb space. It's the seat of our creation, but it's also the seat of our divine feminine and our sexuality. And so you better recognize that if you have a lot of sexual trauma that you don't realize is there, your sacral chakra is going to have some issues. It's going to be out of whack. It's going to be clouded. It's going to have a hard time helping you create new things like launching a business or having a healthy new relationship, because that part of your body, that chakra center, is just having a lot of trouble. There's a lot of shadow there. And so very often within the Create Your Light Academy, my shadow work group, we will go in and clear that shadow from that space, and we'll do it more than once. And the reason why is because women are holding so much sexual trauma. I mean, like, just the group of you guys watching, like, think to yourself, have you been catcalled and made to feel like it was really inappropriate? You felt dehumanized? Have you ever had someone make a comment about your body, like an aunt or a family member or a creepy uncle who says something about your boobs? Have you ever had someone touch you, like being drunk at a bar and having someone just like touch you and then walk away because it's crowded and they can do that because no one's going to stop them? And then that's just like the low-key things. Those are like the easy ones. Then it gets bigger. Then it becomes things like actual abuse or rape. And so many women have had experiences like that, and that's why so many of us carry so much sexual trauma within the sacral chakra and within our shadow. It's all unconscious. We don't realize that it's there. So far we did early childhood trauma, we've got heartbreak, and we've got sexual trauma. The next part is going to start to get kind of cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is ancestral wounds. For those of you guys who are not into spirituality, this one's going to blow your mind, so stick with me here. But we all carry the same DNA that passed through our ancestors. I mean, think about it. You carry 50% genetics from your mom, 50% genetics from your dad. They each carry 50% genetics from each of their parents, and so on and so forth. And that genetic coding has a lot of layers to it. It tells you about your temperament. It tells you about the way that you're going to view the world. That's just the nature piece. Then we add on the nurture piece. Families tend to pass information down about who they are, their morals, what life is going to be like for them. And all that messaging gets passed down as well. And then we have energetics. Each one of us carries an energetic field, an aura. And within our aura, we store so much information about ourselves. And that information gets transferred down from generation to generation to generation. And so what will happen is if you have family members with trauma, with shadow, with stuff they haven't worked out, I hate to break this to you, but you are carrying that stuff for them now. You are the one who is now meant to break these generational curses. You are the one who has to fix the wounds of your ancestors. So here's what this might look like. Imagine you're someone who is in a steady 9-to-5 job. You're making a decent salary. You feel pretty good about life. You don't have a ton of money, but things are okay. Yet you're always living like you're broke. So you're spending your paychecks the second that you have them. You're afraid about money. You don't like when other people talk about it. You get kind of shut down about it. It feels icky. That might not even be from you. That might be something that you're carrying from your ancestors who say were immigrants, who came to this country with absolutely nothing, who had to work 4 jobs to just get by, to feed their kids, to hope that their kids would be okay, and to just cross their fingers and hope that those kids would have a better life than they did. But those kids carried that message down, and then that message was passed on to their kids. And that's how this stuff works. You are carrying your generation's stuff on your back. It lives within your aura, it lives within your DNA, and it lives within your shadow. It's within you. And so to combat this, we can do shadow work. And when we go into the shadow, we can see the origins of these messages. So if I were to do shadow work with this hypothetical person who's got the decent job and is making okay money and has enough money to spend, but they're so fearful, what we'd end up pulling out is images of their great-grandparents trying to figure out the money thing, the poverty that they felt. We could tap into those emotions and feel them fully. We can see the experience of how this was transferred down from generation to generation. And when we do that, we can heal it. We carry so many ancestral wounds. We carry so many generational curses. How many times have you thought, oh, this isn't something that my family does? My family all goes to college, but nobody gets a really good job after that. Or my family doesn't go to college. That's not what we do. Or, anything along those lines. My family, just from personal stuff, my family financially does very well now, but when we were young, I was very poor. And there's so many habits that I had to break, so many generational curses, ancestral wounds that I had to fix. And my family has not done that work yet. The ones around me, I've had to do that for myself. But they still act like they're broke. And they're not even close to broke. They're doing very well. And they still do things, little things, like being afraid to throw things out. So they have a lot of expired food in the house. Storing those plastic bags from all kinds of random places. Going to the store and doing all the 1,000 coupons because they're so afraid to spend an extra 20 cents on something. And those behaviors are fear. They're fear-based behaviors that they're repeating that came from their families and all the way up the line. Sometimes there's deeper ones too that you can see. Like every once in a while we'll do an ancestral healing And when we do that, we'll find out that family members had one of these other traumas happen to them, like an early childhood trauma or sexual trauma or really intense heartbreak. And when that happens, they carry all of that stuff on with them into this generation. You have it in your bloodline. And when that happens, it becomes up to you to do the work to heal it if you want to. A lot of people don't. A lot of people just carry this stuff around with them their whole lives and never do anything to remove it, to eradicate it, to heal it. And they don't realize that it's there. They just let it sit. But you notice it. You feel it. You feel it in your body when you feel uncomfortable. You feel fear. You feel anxiety. You feel depression. And you don't understand why you feel it. So the shadow, going in there and pulling the stuff out to heal it is extremely important. Now I'm going to talk about one more that's super cool. And if you guys see me just constantly going over, I'm waving to everybody. On Facebook up top and Instagram on bottom, so I'm trying to do my best. The last one that I want to talk about with you guys today is past lives. And you guys know I love past lives. And the reason why is because think about how much shit you've dealt with in 20, 30, or 40 years on this planet so far, right? Now imagine doing that 100 times and for twice or 3 times as long. You end up having a lot of stuff that happens to you, a lot of experiences, a lot of things that could potentially influence your brain, influence your body, influence your personality and the way that you live and the way that you experience life. Your past lives are so impactful. And you don't realize it until you go in there and see them. Just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have done past life before? Any past life work, seen a past life, experienced it, had a dream, anything that lets you know where you were? Just give me a wave if you have. You know, the past life stuff is so telling about who you are, the things that are going to make you tick, the job you're supposed to have in this life, the ways that you're going to show up in this world, the relationships that you're going to have, the family life that you're going to have, your purpose on this planet. Your past lives hold the key to all of those things because you've done it all before and you've done it 100 times. But if you don't know that, you're essentially walking around blind. Until you go back and you see it, you have no idea. Now, the shadow, obviously from everything I've told you before, we have the early childhood trauma, the heartbreak, the sexual trauma, the ancestral wounds. A lot of that stuff feels heavy and negative, right? A lot of it feels heavy and negative, and the reason why is because the brain doesn't know what to do with heavy and negative. So it just tries to hide it from you. And when it hides it away from you, it just keeps it somewhere for safekeeping. Like, we'll get to that later. We'll deal with that in the future. That's a problem for future me. It does the same thing with your past lives. If you wanted to, you could access every single past life that you've ever had. You could see them vividly. You can experience them. You can find out where you were, where you've been. But the brain, just like with all the other heavy stuff, doesn't know what to do with that. Because if someone told you at, say, 17 years old, hey, you've had about 1,000 past lives, and a couple of them have been really, really cool, but one of them you lost your head. Do you want to find out more? You'd freak out. Like, what? That's too much for me to process. I don't know what to do with that information. It's all too much. And so what happens is when you're born, you start to forget this information. And your brain puts it into the unconscious. When you're little, you still remember it. When you're little, you remember your past lives. And you'll make comments about them. And if the adults around you are paying attention, they'll hear the comments. And they'll see them for what they are. My 6-year-old daughter the other day, this was kind of wild, because she doesn't do this as much as my son does. And my son is 4. He's much more open about this. My 6-year-old was like, hey, Mom, guess what? And I was like, oh, what? I remember when I got to choose that you were my mom. I remember it. I saw this beautiful white light. I got to speak to God, and he let me choose who was going to be my mom. And I picked you guys because I'd been with you before. And my family members were like, what'd she just say? Like, that's weird. And I was like, oh, tell me more. Like, tell me about what you saw and what that experience was like. Did you want to go with us? Did it feel good? Where were we together before? And I just kept asking questions. I just kept asking her. Because at her young age, her brain is not afraid of this information yet. Eventually, it will be. Eventually, her brain will be able to reconcile that information with what she experiences in her day-to-day life now. And so that information will be locked into the unconscious until she then chooses to go inwards and pull it out again. Every single one of you watching has had past lives. It's just a matter of how many and what they were and what you learned. And your soul is constantly learning in those places. So while the other things that are locked within the unconscious can be really heavy and they can feel a little bit negative, past lives can just be really cool. They can just be incredible. And when we drop into past lives, like we do within my Create Your Light Academy, we're just going in a curious way to see what it is that you need to know. If your soul has been somewhere that's really important for you to know, we're going to see it. If your soul has experienced something or had a specific job or showed up in a certain way, we find that out. And we bring that unconscious information conscious. We make you aware of it so that you can figure out what to do with it. I can't tell you how many times, even just for myself, I've found things out from my past life and then have those light bulb moments of like, oh my gosh, everything makes sense now. Now I understand why I am the way that I am, or why I picked this partner, or why I felt like I needed to be in Philadelphia even though it made no sense. I moved to Philadelphia for no reason. No reason. I had an acquaintancy kind of friend who got a scholarship to Temple a year before me, and I was like, that seems like a fun place. I never visited. I never knew anything about it. I'd never been to Philadelphia before, but I knew I had to go. And sometimes that stuff, a lot of times that stuff, is because of a past life. It's because you've been there before. So it can be really reassuring. It can be really validating for you to experience your past lives, because then you start to put the pieces of this puzzle together. You know, Carl Jung is the one who really coined the term shadow, but shadow work is ancient and it is timeless. It's something that way predates him. But of course, like, he was a white man at the right time, so he got to say the things that he did and make it popular and make people know about it. But he does have some beautiful, beautiful visions of what shadow work is. And I love some of the quotes that he said about it over time. One of them is about understanding that love and light is awesome. But if you don't go into the darkness, you're not really in love and light. You are in a lack of awareness. You're in oblivion. You're in just walking around with your head chopped off. Like, you don't know what it is that you're experiencing until you've walked through your shadow. When you've walked through that shadow and you've seen what makes you tick, when you start to understand who you are inside, like that cliche thing that we always say when we're young, where we're like, I'm going to go find myself. I'm going to use the 20s to go find myself. That's shadow work. That's finding yourself. Everything else is just Band-Aid level stuff. It's like, I'm going to go experience things. So I'm going to have some new experiences, which are lovely, and new experiences are great. But if you don't know why you do certain things, when those new experiences are over, you're going to go back to doing the old things. You're going to revert right back to where you were, doing the same stuff all over again, having your life on loop. And we don't want to be mindless zombies, right? We want to be conscious. We want to be aware. We want to be awake. Everything is open for you right now. This is the most incredible time that there is in this world to be awake. So choose it. Choose to wake up. Choose to see the shadow, to go into it, to dabble into this stuff, because even though some of the things feel heavy and scary, like having early childhood trauma or re-experiencing a heartbreak, it's better than repressing it. Because when you're burying that stuff down and you're just pushing it down, it's not gone. It's still living within your body. It's still taking up space in your aura. It's still making you think certain thoughts. You're just not giving it the attention that it needs, and so it's going to keep doing that. It's going to keep getting louder until you're ready to listen. Unless you're willing to just do it now. Unless you're willing to do it afraid. Unless you're willing to go in a curious way and say, you know what? I don't know what's back there. I have an idea of things that it could be, but I want to go find out. I want to see it for myself. I want to heal it. I want to release it. I want to let it no longer have any control over my life, so that I can just be in the present moment in my body. Because that's something that it pulls you away from. As humans, we're constantly torn away by time. We're either anxious about the future stuff, or we're depressed about the past stuff. We're depressed about what we didn't get to do and opportunities missed, or we're anxious about future opportunities and We want to go somewhere, but we don't know how to get there. But so rarely are we just in this moment. So rarely are we just sitting in this present moment, experiencing it fully. Shadow work is your invitation to come back here. Because even though what we're diving into is the past, even though what we're seeing is stuff that's happened, what we're doing is we're seeing that stuff so we can let it go. We're seeing it so we don't keep living there. And when you stop living in the past, you don't worry so much about the future anymore. It no longer becomes as big of a concern because you realize that this moment is all you have. This is it. This moment is all that you have. And so it's up to you whether or not you want to dive in. All right, I hope that I answered everybody's questions about what lies within the shadow. If you didn't get to see the beginning, definitely make sure you check out the replay. For those of you guys on Facebook, it's going to be posted inside of the Clarity Club Facebook group. And for those of you guys on Instagram, it's going to be posted in my feed. I'll see each and every one of you guys next week on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye, everybody.